Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Scratch My Noodle here on Ethereal TV. I am your host, Jeff Macolino, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Alyse Bacine. So, Alyse, thank you for coming on the show. Tell my audience first, that I mentioned the podcast, so you might as well plug that, and then tell my audience also what it is that you do.
Yes. So I do have a podcast. It's called Reclaiming Consciousness, where I share a lot of my teachings. I'm a breathwork and trauma expert, spiritual mentor, and I have a huge body of work and a lot of programs and clients around helping people clear familial, ancestral, and past life trauma. I do the primary way that I help people do that is through breath work. So I actually discovered breath work when I was 19 years old, so 23 years ago, and I've been teaching and sharing it ever since. I also was a school counselor, so I have a master's degree in counseling psychology and a ton of experience working with trauma. So I eventually started my business and I created my own modality and methodology for healing trauma that I think is more direct and faster than any kind of therapy that you could do or anything else that's out there, really. It happens to be my zone of genius. I'm not good at a lot of other things, but I happen to be really good at this. So that's what I do.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I find with kind of spiritual things is that there are some people who try to be a jack of all trades, but most people find the thing they do well and get into that zone, and that's to me, I think, a good way, a healthy way of looking at it. Like, I don't need to do everything, but I could focus on this and do it well.
Yes, exactly. And then, I can say, like, this one thing I'm a genius at, everything else, not so much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I should just stick to drinking whiskey 24 hours a day. That's
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You seem to be good at that.
yeah, yeah. It's a gift. I just can't, I can't turn. It was given to me for some reason, right? Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
the so there's a few things to dive into. Um, so the ancestral trauma aspect of it, and then you mentioned past lives. Are those two separate things? They tied in together?
They're separate and they tie in together. So the way that I look at it is, the three types of trauma: your family trauma, which would be the trauma you took on from your relationships with your parents and the way they interacted with you and the way they modeled relationships to you. And, when I say trauma, I don't mean like this terrible thing that happened to you once. I mean relational trauma. So sustained relationships over time where you didn't get what you needed, or there was some kind of wound or damage that was done that created beliefs about yourself and the world that are limiting, or just created you feeling like you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're bad, you're wrong, there's something wrong with you, all of that stuff that we all kind of have at the core. So when I say trauma, I mean that. I don't, and I also can mean bigger traumas that happen, right? But that's usually what I'm referring to, especially when I talk about familial trauma. So that is like probably the biggest part of my work. But then the ancestral trauma and the past life trauma kind of go with it. Be in They're similar and different. So I always say when you come into this life, you will recreate in your family dynamics the ancestral trauma and the past life trauma that you already had coming in. So if you deal with the familial trauma, you're going to hit most of that. However, there will be elements to it that you won't hit, that you will have to do separately. And a lot of those things come up for my clients and came up for myself when starting and growing my own business, because it's kind of this place where you go beyond what your family did, or you start to step out into this different realm of doing things. And then there'll be a lot of, like patterns and traumas that will come up for you to clear along the way. So that's how I look at it. They all kind of go together, but they're separate at the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's like a puzzle. The
Yeah.
pieces have to come together.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
so the so again, I'm scratching my noodle thinking of the next question to ask because I have so many different strands of spaghetti going different ways. Um, the I'm really playing into the noodle metaphor. Uh, so the familial stuff, one thing that's stuck in my head as an interesting thing for, your parents and their relationship and everything, I almost wonder if maybe, and that trauma, and again, using the word trauma loosely, could it also be, what if their relationship was too good? Not, and that's not a bad thing on them. It's just like,
Mhm.
well, I want to recreate that, but that is hard to find.
Mhm.
Um,
Is that how your parents were?
yeah, my parents are great. Like there was never a thought that my parents would I mean my mother was in a car accident and was bedridden for 10 years and my dad just, you know, did everything.
Mhm.
Um and it's just like, all right, well I don't know that I could ever love someone that much. And I say that obviously now that I'm a parent myself, I would do anything for my children, but like if I was just attached to somebody else and they were like that, I'd be like, oof, I would put a bullet in my head before I'd want to live that life. And I'm sure my dad mentally struggled. Just didn't show. And I know my mom did too. And the same thing. She was always had a positive, uplifting attitude, even when she, you know, could barely get herself out of bed to go to the bathroom. Um, so part of me thinks, I can't say they inflicted trauma on me by the traditional sense, and I'm not trying to blame my parents for anything part of my life. However, it's like they were so good that it's like maybe the trauma is to the extent of I'm not maybe that's kind of I think you kind of touched on this. Maybe I can never be as good as they are.
Mhm.
So
Well,
uh
yeah, and that is actually a common thing because a lot of what I talk about with trauma, it doesn't necessarily even have to be something your parents did, right? It's just the beliefs that you took on about reality based on watching them, right? And that could be anything. Like when I was a school counselor, I was a school counselor for 10 years. I don't know if I said that or not, but when I was a school counselor, I would have two kids, at the school who were siblings who grew up in the same home, same exact parents, same exact environment, similar ages, and they would have two completely different perceptions of what was going on, right? One would be like completely traumatized or upset or not okay, and the other one is like completely fine. So it's like the trauma or the whatever they experienced is completely their perception, right? So much of this is not even necessarily about what quote unquote happened. It's just your perception of what happened and then what you decided about who you are, what you're capable of, what's available to you, and what type of place the world is based on being in that environment and watching them and absorbing things from them. So, like I said, it's really a matter of your perception and what you decided based on that and how certain things made you feel and maybe what you needed that you didn't necessarily get that you might not even have been aware of. So there's so many like underlying factors, and I always say to people like, even though I talk about, your relationships with your parents and looking at the patterns and parallels between those relationships and the relationships you have now, it's not always literal, right? It's not always going to be like, okay, well, this equals this. It's more of an energy, an underlying pattern, and also being able to acknowledge the way that you felt about certain things that you maybe weren't able to verbalize or understand as a child, because so much of what we absorb from our parents happens before we're able to create conscious logical thoughts, like before the age of 5 or 6, we don't have the ability to have logical linear thinking. So a lot of
Mhm.
our memories, a lot of our experiences are like flashes and pictures and visions and feelings that we don't really have a context for necessarily. However, during that time, there was a lot of things that happened that might have imprinted onto you, just feelings of, oh, well, I need this from this person. I'm not getting that. So maybe that means that there's something wrong with me. Maybe that means that I'm not good enough. So these are like things that we internalize without really being conscious of it, that then we project onto our reality and can show up in our romantic relationships. It can show up inside of like our career or our business or other relationships. You know how there's people who always get into like bad relationships with their bosses or, that type of thing. It's all a result of these unconscious feelings from childhood. And that's what I help people uncover and pinpoint, acknowledge, and shift.
Yeah, I'm I'm sitting here trying not to laugh. I might as well go into this. I was thinking, I'm like, that's why every time I hear a Ramones song, I think about almost drowning as a kid, because I almost drowned as a kid, and after I got out of the pool, um, my mom like went to go to the bathroom, and you know, people just stopped looking at me, and I didn't realize the deep end was the deep end.
Mhm.
And it was at my dad's aunt's house or something. And afterwards, I didn't want to go back in the pool, so I went inside and I watched cartoons with some strange pale man, and it was Joey Ramone. And I didn't know this until he died. Actually, like when he died, my dad's like, "Oh yeah, you met him," and I'm like, "I did. When?" He's like, and I'm like, "Is that the day I almost drowned?" So now anytime I hear the song, it's not a traumatic. I like their music, so it's not a traumatic thing. But I always think, oh yeah, I almost drowned. But I guess that could, with a different person, it could potentially be a trauma response. Then
Yeah.
I just look at it like, oh, that's a cool, weird interaction with a celebrity that I was 4 years old or something, so I had no damn clue who he was. He was
Yeah.
dating my dad's cousin. I guess they dated for a long time. That's why he was there. Uh, but it's just a random like, huh? I have a weird almost died, and then spent some time with this guy who was famous that I didn't realize who he was until literally he died. I'm like, huh? It's a strange connection.
Yeah, that is really weird. But also, it's like those things that just get imprinted in your brain that you will never forget.
Yeah, yeah, and I just remember him being a pale, kind of weird looking. He wasn't a very handsome man. I mean, no disrespect to him, but I
Yeah.
just remember it being weird. I don't know if we spoke to each other at all. But we just were sitting on the couch watching cartoons. So just a bizarre, I'm like, man, I wish I could flash to that moment in my life and just, like just ask him some weird questions and see how he interacts with 4-year-old me. Uh
Yeah.
so the other thing I was thinking with the you were talking about as a school counselor with the two siblings, and that's I think that gets overlooked. And again, bringing it back to myself because I'm a narcissist. That's
No,
one thing.
honestly, I'd rather do it this way because I find it more interesting to like dive into people's stuff. So like bring it on. Tell me.
Yeah, I throw it all out there. So I always make the joke. My brother and I, 3 years apart, raised exactly the same. Um, every female I have been in a relationship with, basically my entire life, I tend to chase after ones who, and I don't mean to use this term in a derogatory way, but they're kind of bitches. They're not the nicest people. Um, they like to fight. That kind of uh, that's just I don't know. There's something that's I like the. I don't want to call it a challenge, but I like someone who challenges me, meaning I can't get away with doing shit like she'll call me out on it.
Yeah.
Whereas my brother goes after the just like a younger version of my mom. Not physical appearance, but like just sweet, loving, always kind, always positive. Not super submissive, but definitely, less so than. And I'm like, well, it's so bizarre. And we're both, and my mom even, I make this joke to my mother, and she's like, which is weird because you're closer to me than he is a little bit. Like I talk to her on the phone hours every week. He doesn't talk, maybe, once or twice a month for here or there. Um, so I'm closer to her as an adult, but I still chase after women who are like the polar opposite of her, whereas my brother wants her. And it's
Well, it
like,
also can be because it's interesting, right? Because even though it could be the same dynamic, we can flip between playing different roles. So, like in relationship, you might actually play the role of your mom, and
hmm,
you're looking for someone who is going to be the person that you can play that role with. That's one, like, option. There like, we could dive in, I'm sure there's many more things going on here, but that's my first take on it because sometimes it's like the dynamic is the same or the energy is the same, it's just that you can flip, what role you're playing in a situation.
yeah, that makes sense. I also, I was talking to a friend not that long ago, and they were like, hey, you just need to meet a female version of you. And I'm like, we'd both be dead within a week. So, like, we'd be like, all the drugs, all the alcohol, let's do everything. Let's just, no, it's like I need to babysit myself, but having another, so maybe that's it. Maybe there's some not trusting myself to not be a child. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, I'm
I mean,
I'm
there's
I'm
nothing
really,
wrong with being a child. It's just, sometimes there's, like, adult things we have to do.
yeah, there's a time and place, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the balancing act I have between having my kids half the time.
Mhm.
And then when I have my kids, like when we're playing like Mario Kart together, it's like, how much do I let them get away with? Like my son the other day was like, "You bastard," and I'm like, you probably shouldn't say that." He's like, "Why?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "It's a cuss word." He's like, "No, it's not." I'm like, "It is." I'm like, don't like you can say it here, but don't go to school and say it, or you'll get in trouble.
There's
Uh,
something so funny about kids cursing too,
yes,
where it's like you can't like my son who's 10 is obsessed with cursing, and it's so hard because it's hilarious, like, when he curses, and then also if you make a joke and you use a curse word in it, he thinks it's so funny, but then he wants to take it to, like, the total, like, extreme, right? And then it's like we have to, like, stop it at some point, but it's like, where do you stop it, you know?
it's a tough yeah, it's a tough if it's a tough line to ride because you doing dabbling in comedy. I'm like sometimes it's funny to just overkill something.
Yeah,
Like I
that's what makes it funny.
yeah, and it's like, but if the kid gets into that habit, they're gonna be in the principal's office a lot.
Exactly.
That's a whole different kind of trauma. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
so the now, do you do past life regressions or?
No, no. So, I'll give you a quick rundown of my take around the past life stuff. I don't think it's a for me anyway, and this is not to, like, disparage anyone else, I just don't find it to be a good use of my time to really go into like, oh, I was this in a past life or I was that in a past life. That's not really, it's just not A, what I'm interested in, and B, 95% of the time, I don't think it actually is necessary or valuable for people. I think it can just get them caught in a story of like, oh my God, this happened to me in a past life. And like, that's why I do this or that's why I do that. And I'm like, okay, but how is that actually helping you? Like, how is that helping you move forward? Like, I'm very straight to the point with my work, and I want to give people like tangible, actionable ways that they can move forward and create results in their lives. And for a lot of times with that, it just doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. So for me, the past life stuff is more around these bigger like archetypal energies, like for women, for example, like, the fear of like putting yourself out there and being in your power, or making money just like for your spiritual gifts, like that type of thing, where women have a lot of like fear around that. And to me, that's like this bigger past life energy of when like women were burned at the stake and killed for going against the church or sharing their gifts and stuff like that. So I more look at the past life stuff as more of these like archetypal energies, not necessarily like needing to figure out what you were in every single lifetime. Because, like I said, I just don't think there's always a ton of value in that, or I don't think it's like necessary. Like, I've had so many different clients who've like just been so attached to these stories of like past lifetimes. And I'm like, what is the point of this? So I don't like, I look at it as just more of, okay, these things that have gone on for lifetimes with women, especially, that we can just become aware of and shift. And that's really it. That's the extent of it for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that, and I think this came up when I was talking to a past life regressionist in the past, of the mindset going into it. There are some people who just want that. I think the stereotypical one is all the women want to be Cleopatra.
Yeah.
And I even said, I'm like, you're right. He did a past life regression on me. And I'm like, I was disappointed. I was hoping I would be Ben Franklin. And it's like, but that's not what it's for. Like, and
Right.
he
That's
also
not
said it's not what it's for. That's like a cool, and again, to me, it's like, it's not even a cool story to tell at a bar because everyone's going to think you're an idiot.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like, oh, I was Ben Franklin in a past life.
Like,
Okay, crazy
okay.
person. Dude,
Yeah.
here's a dollar. Leave me alone. Uh,
Yeah.
like, so it's um, but if the mindset is of you're reliving these experiences to for a purpose, you're trying to tie it into
Well, if
how
you're
this
yeah.
impacts you today, right?
Exactly. So if somebody's having like I'll give you an example actually, because I've done one past life regression and it helped me with this very specific thing that I'll tell you briefly, because I think this is a good example of how it can be good, right? Because I always say nothing is like inherently good or bad, right? There's good and bad things to everything. And um it's not like I'm saying past life regressions are bad. I'm just saying
Right.
for
Yeah.
my work and my purposes, I don't, that's not what I focus on. However, I did a past life regression probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And ever since my kids were born, I mean that my kids are 8 and 10 now, so this is a while ago, but ever since my kids were born, I would have this like horrible fear of something terrible happening to them. And I know that that can be common for moms or whatever. But I also think it's because a lot of moms have had lifetimes where they lost a child or whatever. There's some trauma around that. But anyway, I did a past life regression where I went back to a lifetime where I did lose a child. And then I was able to like heal from that and find some closure around that, which I do feel like helped with that like fear that I had. I mean, it doesn't like make it fully go away, but it's like you find some sort of like reconciliation or reason why you feel that way, and it kind of makes sense and you're able to have some closure around it. So I feel like with things like that, where maybe it's like someone has like an inexplicable fear of fire or something, and it's like, oh well, I was burned alive, like okay, then maybe it makes sense to go back and like reconcile that. But like that to me is, the only reason why maybe you'd want to do that.
Yeah. Now you've got me thinking. I need to go in with that I have that child thing. Like I say this somewhat jokingly, but I say a lot of the reason I drink, yeah, I get in that habit is so I dull down my dreams, because for a while every dream I had was my children getting hit by cars or otherwise brutalized and killed.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, you don't really want to go back to sleep after that dream.
No.
Uh, and literally, I still have that. I mean, it's an interesting, and I get maybe this is something I need to dive into with a past life regressionist, because
Mhm.
I remember dropping my kids off at Sunday school, and the classes had to walk across the parking lot and go up. My son or one of them had to go upstairs, and those stairs are like terrazzo, like really hard. If you fall down those stairs, you're gonna die. And
Mhm.
all I could see were my kids getting hit by some old person who didn't, just plowed through the kids in the parking lot. And going up the stairs, one of them, especially my daughter, because she's kind of
Mhm.
klutzy, just falling down the stairs and dying. And like
Mhm.
I would drop them off, walk to my car, and just sit there and like just be nervous. And I would wait until they crossed the street to leave. And I usually waited a few minutes after that, thinking, okay, if something happens when she's going up the stairs, I'll see the ruckus and I'll be there.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's like that is a fucked up way to go through life when you're like,
No, it really is because it's like you're literally bracing for like disaster at all times, you know? So, and also like I would say for this too, like you don't necessarily have to do a past life regression. You can all there's other ways to like mitigate that because there's always other factors around it too. Like obviously there could be past life stuff. It can also just be your own anxiety or fear that comes from other things, right? But like yeah, that's definitely not a way to go through life. And I think also it's about like as a parent learning how to manage that. Like for me, I think I've gotten really good at managing it. So even if that stuff comes up, I'm able to shift myself out of it pretty quickly. But it still comes up at times because I think as a parent, like your the thing that happens to you as a parent is like this thing kicks in where you're like, my job is to make sure this child survives. Like that's what I have to do. So you
mm-hmm.
have this inherent like need to make sure this kid survives. So then that's going to make it so that you're make sure that nothing bad happens so that they survive. So there's also that piece of it that's just inherent as a parent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's this is a real uplifting thing. It's always I've kind of had a saying of I've told people if my children both died somehow, both of them died, unless there's revenge to be had. Weird, weird thing to add in, but
I
don't
hear
don't even bother coming to look for me. Just send the funeral home to pick up my corpse because I'm out.
yeah.
So maybe that's part of it too. It's like my own existence depends on them both surviving in my head. Well, and in reality, but again, that the odds of that happening, thank God, are very
Yeah.
slim because
Yeah.
you know. Anyways, I also need to examine my fear of frogs. Maybe that's a separate.
Oh, do you have a fear of frogs?
I do. I do. I have an irrational fear of frogs. I know it is stupid. And I just can't. I mean, you know what? I'll say this about frogs: they find a way to terrorize me in ways that no other animal has or can't. Like I don't like a lot of animals because I've had, like I'm not a huge fan of dogs because I remember a dog like when I was a kid, like barking at me and like snarling at me. And now I'm like, yeah, these things are animals. You never know what dog is nice and what dog's going to try to eat you.
Yeah.
So I'm hesitant around most animals. But frogs find a special way to terrorize me.
Do
I,
you
I
have frogs where you live? Where do you live?
I'm in Florida, so
Oh,
we
so
we
you do
have
have frogs.
like little frogs. They're not like big crazy frogs, but they just always. I had so as a child, we were in my mom's minivan, and there was a frog that like blended into the ceiling and like was this close to my head, and it was like beige, and I couldn't get my seatbelt undone to get away from it, and I just started screaming and crying, and this thing terrorized me. Um, and then that might be why I'm afraid of frogs, but
Mhm.
because I don't know if it existed before then. But it's everyone gets one animal. But also, I remember distinctly, I had just cut my hair. I was in the shower, so and that plays into it because there's hair going down the drain and stuff, so it's a little murkier than normal. And as I'm toweling off in the shower. I'm looking at the drain mainly to check, did the hair go down? Do I need to wipe? Whatever. And I'm like, is that a eyes looking at me? And then a frog comes out and just goes at me. Now I slip and slide and smash my leg. I still have a scar on my leg from falling because I was gushing blood. I probably should have gone and gotten stitches.
Oh my God.
Uh, and this frog this big made a 6'2", like 250-pound man almost die screaming and sprawling. And then my kids wouldn't come help me either, which is the worst. I was just spraying chemicals at it and hoping it died. It didn't, but I trapped it eventually in a cup. And I had to call my older sister to come and remove it from the house. My the 6'2", 250-pound man had to call his 5'3", 90-pound sister to come save him from a 2-inch frog. It's one of my
Wow.
manlier moments.
I would say there might be some sort of past life implication here because it does seem like a little bit of an irrational fear.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, it's definitely irrational. It doesn't make sense. I
Mhm.
uh I do remember too. I joked in Costa Rica. I was there for a bachelor party, and some lady, as I opened the door, some lady walked by with a dog that like almost clipped me. Like, and I jumped back, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Oh, it's fine. Uh, I'm not afraid of dogs, but if that was a frog, I would have had a heart attack." And she's like, "Frogs? Why would you be afraid of frogs?" I'm like, "I don't know." She's like,
Well, wait,
"Well,
did you see any frogs in Costa Rica? Because I was just gonna
I
say,
did
when I was in Costa Rica,
at
the
night."
biggest frog I've ever seen, like
Yeah.
literally, that is a frog I would say is like reasonable to be afraid of.
Right. Well, and then she says, "Oh, frogs, why would you be afraid of them? Although they are poisonous, so don't touch them." I'm like, "Well, what?" I'm like, "You have poisonous frogs just hopping around all over the place." And I only saw them at night. So it was like you had
Mhm.
to really
Yeah.
keep your eyes out for them. And I'm like, so,
Oh,
so
yeah.
these things could kill you, and you're like, "Ah, why would you be afraid of them?" Oh, yeah. That's my one animal. I'm not afraid of snakes, not afraid of roaches, not afraid of spiders. Everyone's got one. I feel
Yeah.
like everyone has one animal that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't really like spiders or I don't think anyone likes roaches though.
hmm, is it bad to say this is why I want to have a animal communicator on at some point, but I don't think it'll go well. Um, I enjoy killing roaches. Like I get some perverse pleasure out of this is we're going real Florida man here. My
Yeah.
friends bought a house that was not taken care of well, so while they were moving in, there were a lot of roaches that had to be killed to, you know,
Yeah.
clean out this house. And they had me over, and I wear my slides. I just kick it off, and I bam, just use.
Mhm.
I killed like 30 cockroaches in an afternoon, and I was just like, oh yeah, I'm like Captain America. This my slides are my shield. I
Well, I think it's also the fact that like they say that like roaches never die or they just will always live on even like, if there's like a nuclear something. So maybe that's why you feel so good about it because they're like hard to kill or you know, they're hard to kill.
Yeah, that must be it. That's like the one I've adapted a lifestyle of. I don't try to kill animals like I don't even try to kill spiders if they're just the little ones. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
they're gonna eat. Yeah, I don't want them in my house, but they're gonna eat the bugs you don't want in your house. So
Yeah, so that's why you should have them. They eat mosquitoes. We don't kill spiders either.
yeah, no, and geckos. We have a lot of geckos, and I like the tiny ones. The big gelatinous looking ones. I'm like, kind of creepy looking, but I'm not gonna kill any of them.
Yeah,
Just it's like I'll leave you be, you leave me be. You know.
exactly. We can coexist.
Yeah. Again, they eat the things I don't want in the house. Now,
Right.
frog, I'll go at with a broom, a shoe. I'll try to poison, kill, obliterate. You know. That's where I think the episode with the animal communication person, the people who can, mediums or
Yeah.
whatever with animals.
Yeah.
I think the episode would derail when I talk about my murder rage for frogs.
Well, maybe they would communicate with the frogs, and it would be that the frogs actually hate you, and
Yeah, clearly.
your fear is founded.
I mean that shower thing. It's like that was a targeted attack. Like it
Yeah,
was
I would say so.
yeah. It's there.
That
We
was a
have a
method from the frog kingdom.
Tell me a little bit what you can to someone who doesn't understand anything about the metamorphosis method. That's your thing. Did you
That's my
create that?
methodology. Yes, I created that. Yeah. So I basically created this methodology for healing trauma. And there's three components to it. So there's the breathwork component. So, I've trained extensively in breathwork, and I've created my own way of doing it. So I have the breathwork component, and that really works on the level of, like the body, because we store a lot of things in our bodies, especially like old wounds or stuck emotions, or all of that stuff is stored in the body. So the breath work really targets the body, and you can actually release stuff from the body. So, that's where I think a lot of talk therapy can fall short, because we're only looking at the mind, right? But like a lot of times it's a pattern of energy that's running in your body, and it has to be released from the body as well. So that's where the breath work piece comes in. And then I also have my trauma clearing tools, which I've created, over time, to help people on the level of their intellect understand, what it is that happened that they keep recreating, or what is the belief that they keep projecting on the world. And then I show them like how to recognize it and pinpoint it, how to shift it, and then also how to use your current relationships as a mirror to understand the deeper stuff from childhood that's coming up now, so that you can use that relationship to understand what's happening and shift it. So that's how I teach people to clear trauma, is actually through your relationships now and how you're relating to the world now. So that's my trauma clearing tools. And then there's also an energy work component to it too, where I help people clear things just from their energy field as well. So yeah, so that is my methodology. It's kind of at the cornerstone of all of the work that I do. It's going to be anything you do with me, you're going to have that as a component of it. And then I also have a certification program where I teach people how to implement that with their own clients. But to me, it's like, it's way more targeted and much faster than therapy, and much faster than just a lot of the healing modalities that are out there, because I have a really quick way of getting to the core, like the source of what's happening, so that you can shift it pretty easily.
It strikes me talking to you that and this I love this, and it's an interesting thing. I feel like some people almost are too obsessed with the spiritual journey to do the fast tracking that's necessary. Like
Mhm.
to me, I'm like, why take 5 years to heal what could be done in 5 minutes or 5 months, or whatever the timeline is. And you kind of seem to have that focus, which again, to me is and again, I couch this in, I'm not speaking for all non-experts, but I think sometimes the casual observer is turned off by, oh, well, this is going to take me years. I'll just put a band-aid on it. Like
Yeah.
I'll just limp by the rest of my life. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life learning how to heal. I'll just, finish my life. Whereas you seem more, I almost, the word utilitarian is coming into my head. Like, no, you got, let's fix it. Like as fast as we can. We don't need to take a whole, we don't need to build our life around examining this.
Yes.
Let's
That's
fix
the
it.
thing that really annoys me, actually. Like you don't need to keep figuring things out. Like there's a stage where, yes, we want to figure out like why you do the things that you do, what your relationships were with your parents and how they created these like patterns or whatever. But then after that, like I always say to my clients, I'm like, okay, we don't need to figure this out. We don't need to figure out why you're doing this. We already know why you're doing it. We already figured that out. Now just use the tools that I gave you to shift it. Like we don't need to keep trying to figure it out. And I think that like in the healing space and in the spiritual space, there can be a lot of time wasted in like re-explaining or trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing when like there's literally only one reason, especially if you already like figured out what that is, which is what I help people do. And then after that, it's like, oh, you found yourself doing that thing again, here's how we change it and let's move on, so because I would myself get really frustrated with like, just a lot of ambiguous kind of rhetoric like, oh, you need to open up and receive more, and I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I don't understand what that means. Like, give me an actionable way of doing that. Don't
Right.
just tell me that that's what I need to do, because like, what does that mean? And also I think like not to be rude, but I think there's also just a lack of training around like real trauma and what that is and how to shift it. And that's why I created a certification program, because I am very passionate about helping people like learn how to work with clients from a place of integrity and knowing how to actually get them real results versus just like giving them kind of an experience, but without being able to take that experience and use it to create a real change. Because to me, that's the only reason why I'm doing this work and why I'm doing it with my clients is to create a result, right? It's not just to have an experience. So I'm much more focused on like how I can help people create a tangible result in like the quickest way, but also the most tangible way, so they feel like they can walk away with like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I'm going to create a result. And I have a context now for what's happening, for why I keep doing the same thing over and over again. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and it seems, correct me obviously if I'm wrong, but it seems like with you, it's a client could be there with you for a very short time or relatively short time compared to some paths that are like, this is a lifetime, like this is my XYZ, and I go to them twice a year or every month, or whereas yours can be like, let's get this, let's find the result we want, we're done, bye, come
Yeah,
back if
and
you need me, but
exactly. And there's people that like will just work with me for a month, and that like, I'll have people that come to me that are like, I have this very specific issue and I don't know what it's where it's coming from. I haven't been able to resolve it. I've done A B C D E F X Y Z and I haven't been able to clear it, and I'll be able to help them find like why it's happening and shift it, and then, in 4 weeks, we're done and they can move on with their life. And then there's other people who want to like work with me longer term to continue the journey, So I think it's both. Yes, I think like obviously there your life is always evolving, everything's always unfolding and you're always changing, and it's nice to, get support around that. So you obviously you can do this work for a longer time, and there's people I've worked with for, 2 or 3 years at this point, but also they've evolved and changed a lot in that time. It's not like we're just doing the same thing over and over again. So I think it's both. There's people who come in and just work with me for a short amount of time, get the result that they want and move on. And then some people, will choose to be around longer to continue to grow and create more. So it just really depends on what you want. But yes, as far as like specific results go, we can do that pretty quickly.
what is the attitude you look for people to have? And if I, so this kind of touches on a little bit with what I was saying with the past life regression earlier. If you just go in wanting a story it's just going to be something you can randomly tell people who are going to look at you funny because you're talking about your past lives. Whereas if you go into a past life regression with a goal of, I want to understand why I do feel this way, you can actually maybe uncover an answer. So obviously a good, I mean, I know my friend Daniel who does past life regressions, he wants that attitude of, you want to uncut, he wants to actually help, not just create this woo woo story for somebody to tell.
Right.
Um, so that's what I mean by the question. Like, is there I feel like you almost want someone more along the lines of, like, well, and I don't know. I guess that's where my question. Do you want someone who's like, please, Alyse, just fix me fast, or do you want someone who's like, I have this problem. I don't care how long it takes, but please help me fix it. As opposed to, again, the person who just wants to spend their life in, in the woo woo, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want the main thing that I want with someone who is working with me is someone who is coachable, someone who's willing to do the work. Because like the reality is, like, I'm not going to fix you. You're going to fix yourself. I'm just going to give you all the tools and I'm going to give you everything you need. I'm going to show you exactly what to do. I'm going to show you what the problem is and exactly how to shift it, but you're the one who has to do that, right? So I want people that are willing to do the work and are willing to take what I say and just run with it. I don't want people who are like attached to why they can't do this or why they can't do that or why they have to stay here or what, you know what I mean? Like that's what I don't want. I don't like when people um like, have a reason for why they can't do what I'm telling them to do. You know what I mean? That's what I just want people that are willing to do the work and are open to listening to what I'm saying and looking at the the perspective that I'm seeing, even if it's hard for them to hear. So that's more what I'm looking for. And there will be people who have a specific thing where they're like, I really want to specifically shift this, or there'll be people who come in who are more like, I know that I need to make a change in my life. I just don't know what it is. And that person I usually can help pretty quickly too. It's just because usually when people say they're confused or they don't know, it's not actually true. They just don't want to see the thing that they need to do because then it would mean a slew of things that they think it means. So they don't want to admit to themselves that that's what they need to do. So I'll just help them see that. And that usually is pretty fast also.
How it's continuing on the mindset part. I'm always curious. There's obviously some people who have horrible childhoods, and I'm not sure how they get through life, meaning, abuse,
Mhm.
just neglect, whatever. The parents, unfortunately, not all parents love their children, or
Or are capable of it.
right. And it's that's obviously one thing, right?
Yeah.
Where there's undeniable trauma. Then I feel like there's the mindset. So when I was talking to somebody, I don't remember if it was a therapist or a spiritual person, but I remember having a conversation and they asked me about my childhood. And I'm like, it was great. My parents are perfect. They did everything. And they asked me and they're like, well, when I was in when I was going through like negative moments in my childhood, oh, my Uncle Fred died when I was 4 and I really loved him, and my Aunt Rose died when I was 11 and I really loved her, was really close with her. um and then my mom had a miscarriage a year later, and then she had a car accident a few years after that and was in bed for 10 years. And I almost drowned and Joey Ramone watched cartoons with me. But when I was going through, they're like, you had so much trauma. And I'm like, no, I had a great childhood. But I realize that some people could probably be stuck on all the trauma. And luckily, none of my siblings are. Um, because yeah, your mom having a miscarriage is not a fun experience. I mean, it was like 6 months, 7 months, like, so like ready for baby kind of thing. It was horrible. And cancer with my uncle and aunt, not fun. My mom being stuck in bed for most of my, middle school, high school, college years, not fun. But I'm like, but I never viewed any of that as like a negative thing. I mean, obviously those things were negative, but again, if you ask me my childhood, I'll say it was great. Like I had loving parents and siblings.
Okay, here's what I want to say about that. I think most people will have a similar view as you. So it's not the trauma piece. So, first of all, this is something I always say around doing this work that's incredibly important to understand is that you have to be able to hold two perspectives at once. You have to be
Mm,
able to say, my parents are amazing people. I love them so much. I'm so grateful for them. And there were these things that they did or things that happened that were hurtful to me or that I didn't understand or whatever it was, right? So we have to be able to have those things can both exist, right? And what I will say too is that most people are not like thinking like, "Oh, these things happened to me or this was negative." It's not usually going to show up that way. It's usually going to show up somewhere in your life that's not working, right? So it can show up like for a lot of people that I work with, it could show up in the way of like they really want to start their own business, for example, but they can't get out of the starting gates. Like they have the idea, they know what they need to do, but for some reason they can't do it, right? Or maybe it'll show up in their relationships where they keep recreating the same exact dynamic with somebody and then it goes explodes into chaos and they're like, I thought this person was different, why does this keep happening? So it's usually not going to show up where you consciously are like, oh, I had these bad things happen to me or I'm stuck on it. It's going to show up somewhere in your life where things aren't working to get your attention to look at what is like this deeper reason behind why I keep recreating the same thing over and over again. It could also show up, it shows up for a lot of people with money too, because money is a big
mm.
place that, people can struggle or their wounding can show up or your feelings of not being good enough or not deserving or whatever can show up with money. So it really will end up showing up for people and it depends on the person, right? But it'll usually show up for you as something in your life that is perpetually not working the way you want it to. And then when you decide that you're going to try to like, quote unquote fix it and you come to someone like me and say, "Why do I keep having this thing happen over and over again?" That's when I'm going to go into things that happen and I'm going to be able to tell you like at the core, what is the reason why you keep recreating this?
Gotcha. Gotcha. So yeah, that's interesting. The I'm like, all right, I've only got a few minutes left in this episode. I want to choose the path I go down next, whether to stay on topic or dive to a different one. And this is me like half a beer in. Like, just imagine if I was drinking whiskey like I normally do.
I mean, I kind of want to see what that version of you would be like.
Well, we can recreate this on the podcast. I'll a little later in the day, and yeah, I will. Yeah, no, I've had some. I'll say this with the Jeff Macolino podcast, which I probably should plug on this show more.
Mhm.
Uh, I've had some episodes I don't remember recording, so those are not my finest work, but there's a
It's interesting though. I find, I don't drink while I work because of the nature of my work, but
right.
I do drink sometimes I enjoy it. I really love wine. But I have, what's funny is like I will always do things when I'm drunk that I don't remember that are really smart. And then the next day I'll wake up and I won't remember that I did it and I'll assume that something isn't done. And then I'll look back and be like, oh my God, I organized like all of these things to make it easier for myself the next morning. And I have no recollection of it. And now I've like made it so much easier for myself, but like I don't remember it.
Yeah, no, I have this is a great way to end this episode because I'll freak you out with I have drunk Jeff and sober Jeff are two very different individuals housed inside one meat suit. And they used to have an antagonistic relationship.
Mhm.
I found just the other day when I was going through notebooks trying to come up with a sketch idea. Because I write down joke ideas and stuff and all that. I found in one of those notebooks a letter addressed to drunk Jeff from sober Jeff, saying, "Hey, fat ass, don't order McDonald's on Uber Eats. Go to bed." Like very aggressively mean. And I do also remember I occasionally blackout drunk Jeff recorded videos on the phone,
Mhm.
and I sometimes would take 2 to 3 days to find these videos. Sober Jeff.
Right.
And it was not nice things like that was said. So now I always compare it to Bruce Banner and the Hulk. I'm like, well, we used to be enemies, like, we don't like each other, but we share this being. Now we're good. We're good. Like drunk Jeff does some things behind the scenes that are helpful. There's also the times I've woken up with my remote control in the toaster. There's not really logic to that, and I don't know what happened to to do that. But in general, I wake up in my bed or on my recliner, one of the two. I'm always alive. I'm never in jail. Obviously, I'm always alive thus far. Uh, I'm never in jail. I generally don't I've never gotten in fights. I mean, not in the past 15 years, probably. Um, so it's like, we take care of each other a little bit. There's some moments of like, why'd you do that? I'm going through my phone today from last night's, like, usually I don't text or call or post on social media. Last night I did a little bit. So I'm going through like who did I one friend I sent like 8 messages to, and luckily, not a big deal, but I'm like, ooh, I need to go through and see if I sent those to people who would not like getting 8 messages at midnight. Uh, you can lose friends that way, drunk Jeff. But yeah,
Sure.
it's an interesting, like, two different beings. And
Yeah.
I'm slowly going to start shifting towards the other one soon. The green guy is going to come out soon.
Well, I mean, from a trauma perspective, I talk about creating a relationship with your inner child, like the wounded part of you and like embracing that part of you. So I think you're describing like a version of that work where you're embracing and integrating both parts and they're getting along with each other and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I view it. I don't know if medical doctors would agree with it, but that's
Well, it's
a
just a matter of perspective.
yeah. I think I'm in a mentally healthy place right now. But then again, I say that, and I could look back at this in 5 years and say, "Oh my God, what was I doing with my life?" Um, I mean, yeah, that'll happen either way. But Alyse, can you one more time tell my audience where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Alyse_breathes. My website, ElyseBreathes.com. Also, my podcast, Reclaiming Consciousness. That's a great way to dive into my work.
Awesome. Well, Alyse, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on Scratch My Noodle. And maybe we'll talk again in the future and you'll get drunk Jeff instead of sober Jeff. And
That would be cool. All
that
right.
that maybe should be a thing that I do more often and let people pick which one they like more. It's an
Yeah, sure.
interesting idea. Uh, Alyse, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.